Joining us now is Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott.
And Mayor Scott, we've heard pieces of your reaction to the president's comment about Baltimore being so far gone. Can you tell us a little bit about what your reaction is to him saying that?
Well, listen, this isn't the first time the president has attacked Baltimore. It won't be the last time, right? We know the president thinks of our city in a different way. If you peel back the onion for the things that he says about the city time and time again, you know that there's racial undertones there. You know there's class undertones, but it just also shows the president again. And I want Baltimoreans to hear me very clearly. He wants to distract us from the things he doesn't want to talk about. When you think about our sister city in DC, they have the lowest violent crime that DC has had in 30 years, including the 4 years that the president was previously the president. It's lower than it was then. And this is also a president who literally pardoned criminals who tried to take over the Capitol and who tried to kill his former vice president. So we know that this president picks and chooses when he thinks criminals should be held accountable. And this is the way that he's doing this. There's no strategy. The DC police obviously have a successful crime strategy, and you don't hear myself, you don't hear Mayor Bowser in DC or any mayor saying that we've solved the violent crime issue in this country. What we are saying, and saying rightfully so, is that cities around the country are safer now than they have been in many cases, including Baltimore, in my lifetime. We're talking about Baltimore having the fewest amount of homicides through today's date on record. And I think that what you're seeing is a overreach from the president. And it's also, again, that latest distraction tactic. He doesn't want people asking him or talking about the economy and how that is tanking under his leadership. He doesn't want to talk about things like the Epstein files. He doesn't want to talk about the US's standing in the world and our national security. So they flood the zone with things that they know are going to distract people. And you can see what's happening in DC. I saw a video of two men just sitting on their own porch, one smoking a cigarette, one drinking, which is actually allowable under DC law, and them just being hemmed up simply because they were outside and simply because of what neighborhood they were in and what color of their skin. That's not how policing works in America the right way. We all want people to go after people that are absolutely committing violent crime, bringing drugs, bringing guns into our community, harming people. Everybody wants that. But you cannot just go through and roll through neighborhoods and pull up any and everybody. We know that here in Baltimore probably better than anywhere else because the actual federal government found us in violation of the people's constitutional rights for many years that happened, especially when I was a young man growing up in Baltimore. This is just, if the president really wanted to help cities, what he would have done is said to those local FBI agents in charge and all these other folks, how are you working with these police departments and these local cities to achieve these numbers that have already been going down? How do we help them go further? But he didn't do that. They had to make everything into a spectacle to distract people, and also noting that the president and that right wing propaganda media that they have are going to just keep sensationalizing any incident and trying to convince the American people that these numbers that are actually verified by the FBI that the president oversees says that violent crime is at its lowest. But no one is saying that the issue is solved, and I think that's a very important thing because they want the president, his team, members of his party, members of their media arm, want people to feel like everyone's saying that it's solved, but they are absolutely weaponizing this issue as a distracting tactic.
Mayor Scott, you mentioned the numbers being down in D.C., the drastic reduction in numbers here in Baltimore. But you're not resting on those numbers. You know, more
Absolutely
work needs
not.
to be done. We've seen, unfortunately, that mass shooting over the weekend. Talk a little bit about the group violence reduction strategy and the role and what you plan to do moving forward.
Yeah, we're going to continue to expand the group violence reduction strategy because we know it works. We identified the folks who are the most likely to be the victim or perpetrator of gun violence. We give them an opportunity to change their life. And if they don't, they'll be removed, right? We have that great partnership with the police commissioner, myself, the state's attorney, our attorney general here in Maryland as well, all of us, the governor, working on this issue to solve this issue. But it's not the only thing that we're doing. I think that's important to know. Our police officers, even in areas that don't yet have GVRS, like Park Heights, where we had this incident happen the other day, which is very personal for me. Anybody that knows me knows I spent countless hours myself standing on that very corner because one of my best friends lives right there. People that I know live right there on that block to this day. And we're going to find out the cowards that shot to shoot up those people, including that little baby. We're not going to tolerate that. But we also just have to be smarter about how we're dealing with those issues. And every single incident matters to us. We don't get to pick and choose which neighborhood. We don't get to pick and choose which incident. But we should be focusing on what the president could be doing. The president right now could go out and say that he's going to join the fight that myself and mayors around the country have against these Glock switches that allow only Glock pistols to be turned into automatic weapons, allowing all these rounds to be shot. He could join us. He could say, Glock, you have to stop making these. Not attacking all guns, but making guns the way they should be. He can come out right now and say, we're going to ban AR-15 and all these assault rifles that you need 4 months of military training to get, that you can just walk into a store to get. He could join the fight and say that we're going to ban ghost guns and 3D printing guns. He's not doing that, right? He's looking for folks to respond in an emotional way. He wants to push people away from their own good God-given critical thinking skills to do things like this. We're going to remain focused every day with our police officers going out there, removing guns, removing violent people from the streets, giving them to the state's attorney for him and his team to do prosecutions as they've been doing a great job of. We're going to make sure that our community violence intervention, historic investments that we're making into that work, paying people, even those who were once on that side of other side of the law, to stop incidents even before they happen, working with the actual community groups to do all of these things. That's what we're going to continue to do here in Baltimore. We're not going to be distracted. We are not. These numbers, even though they're the lowest that we've ever seen in Baltimore on record, still aren't good enough for me, and we're going to work every day to improve them.
And Mayor Scott, I know we have reported heavily in recent years about youth crime, youth violence, and I know this has been a big area of focus for you to help get the youth active and involved in different activities and things to get them off the street and focused in a good direction. Tell me a little bit about how these plans and policies have turned into action and what you've seen with the youth in the community.
Well, listen.
Looks like we got a little.
Become the victim. Think about the stuff when you think about with the young people being fewer and fewer than being the victim of homicides and shootings in Baltimore. But when you add on for us that we had 8,500 young people in youth works this summer. We also had all these seats in city schools where young people are learning literacy and getting the credit recovery. 42 summer camp sites for recreation and parks. We have to engage our young people in every way. The teen events that Rec and Parks has had. And at the same time, we continue to hold young people accountable for our side when things happen. Making sure, again, that if you're a young person and you're committing carjackings, robberies, all of those things, we will arrest you and work with our partners on the state side, from the state's attorney, obviously, DJS and others, to make sure that there's accountability there. We will not stop to focus on this issue in its totality.
Mayor Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Anytime.